The red sand of Kethmaran crunched under Dr. Elena Vasquez's boots as she walked toward the ancient ruins. The dead planet had no atmosphere, so she moved carefully in her environmental suit. Behind her, the rest of the research team followed in a line across the barren landscape. "The readings are getting stronger," said Zixtal, the tall blue alien from Altair. His voice came through the comm system with a musical quality that all his people shared. "Whatever the predecessors left here, it's big." Elena nodded and checked her scanner. The energy signatures were unlike anything they had seen before. The predecessors had vanished 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only empty cities and mysterious technology that no one could understand. "Dr. Vasquez," called Christ, the living rock creature from the Zephyrite worlds. When she spoke, her crystal body made tiny bell sounds. "The entrance is here." The team gathered around a smooth wall of black stone. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly in the dim light of Kethmaran's distant sun. Elena had been studying predecessor writing for 10 years, but these marks were different from anything in the databases. Jeknor, the insect-like alien from the hive worlds, clicked his mandibles together. "My people have analyzed the stone. It is not from this planet. The minerals are unknown to our science." Elena pressed her gloved hand against the wall. The symbols grew brighter, and with a deep rumble, the wall split open like water. Cool air rushed out, somehow still breathable after all these millennia. "Incredible," whispered Zixtal. "The preservation technology is beyond our understanding." They entered a vast chamber carved from solid rock. The walls stretched up into darkness, covered with more of the glowing symbols. But what made Elena gasp was what stood in the center of the room. A crystal pillar rose from the floor as tall as a tree and filled with swirling light. Around it, smaller crystals floated in the air, spinning slowly and humming with power. The whole room felt alive, waiting. "It's a data storage system," said Krista, her crystal body resonating with the energy in the room. "But the amount of information stored here, it would take our best computers years to process." Elena approached the central pillar carefully. As she got closer, the humming grew louder, and the lights inside the crystal began to move faster. When she was close enough to touch it, the crystal suddenly flared with brilliant light. The room filled with images. Three-dimensional pictures appeared in the air, showing star maps and alien worlds. The team watched in amazement as the history of the galaxy unfolded before them. "Look," said Jeknor, pointing with one of his 4 arms. "These stars, they match our current maps, but this shows the galaxy from long ago." The images changed, showing great cities on beautiful worlds. Aliens of many kinds lived together in peace. Their technology was amazing. Ships that could travel between dimensions, machines that could reshape matter, and computers that thought faster than any living mind. But then the images grew dark. The beautiful worlds became empty. The great cities turned to dust. One by one, entire star systems simply vanished from the maps. "What happened to them?" Elena whispered. The crystal pulsed and new symbols appeared in the air. Elena's heart raced as she recognized some of the marks from her studies. But many were completely new, complex beyond anything she had seen. "We need to translate this," she said. "Everyone start recording. We'll work on this together." For hours, the team worked to decode the message. Zixtal's people were natural linguists, and his musical mind found patterns in the symbols. Christ could analyze the mathematical relationships between the marks. Jeknor's hive mind connected him to the greatest databases of his species. Slowly, piece by piece, the message began to make sense. "Here," said Zixtal, his voice excited. "This section talks about a great threat, something called the Great Devouring." Elena frowned as she studied the symbols. "And this part mentions something burning between stars. A flame that consumes?" Christ's bell-like voice was worried. "The mathematical progressions here suggest a countdown. Something was measured in time, waiting for a specific moment." Jeknor's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed information from his home world. "My people have found references to this phrase in our oldest records. The flame that burns between stars appears in warnings from ancient times." Elena felt a chill as more of the message became clear. The predecessors had not just vanished. They had been running from something so terrible that the most advanced civilization in galactic history could not fight it. "Wait," she said, staring at a new section of symbols. "This talks about a trigger, an event that would signal when something would return." The team worked faster now, driven by growing fear. The message spoke of calculations and predictions. of watching the stars for a sign that the time of ending was near. Then Zixtal made a discovery that changed everything. "Elena," he said, his musical voice shaking, "you need to see this section. It talks about the trigger event, about what would signal the return of the threat." Elena hurried to where he was working. The symbols he had translated made her blood run cold. "When the young race with red blood and stubborn hearts arrives among the stars," she read aloud, "the time of ending draws near. They are the catalyst, the spark that ignites the final war." The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the crystals. "Red blood," whispered Christ. "Only one species in the galaxy has red blood." Elena's hands trembled as she continued reading. "They will come from a blue world, third from its star. They will be called—" She stopped, unable to say the word. Jack Nor finished the translation, his voice barely audible. "Humans." The team stared at each other in the glowing chamber. Elena felt the weight of the discovery crushing down on her. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. They were still newcomers, still proving themselves worthy of trust and friendship, and now they had found an ancient prophecy that named humans as harbingers of doom. "There must be more," Elena said desperately. "Some explanation, some context that we're missing." They searched through more of the data, but the message was clear. The predecessors had studied the patterns of galactic development for millions of years. They had calculated that when a species with humanity's specific traits achieved space travel, it would mean the galaxy was ready for harvesting, ready for something called the Devourers to return. "We have to report this," said Zixtal, but his voice was uncertain. "The Galactic Council needs to know." "Know what?" Elena asked bitterly. "That my species is apparently destined to bring about the end of everything?" She looked around at her alien colleagues, seeing the fear in their eyes. These were her friends, beings she had worked with for years. But now they looked at her differently, as if seeing her for the first time. The prophecy was already changing things, and she had not even left this dead world yet. Elena made a decision that would haunt her. She activated her recorder and began transmitting the translation to the research ship in orbit. Within hours, the message would reach the galactic networks. Within days, every species in the galaxy would know that humans were prophesied to bring about their destruction. As the team prepared to leave the chamber, Elena took one last look at the crystal pillar. The ancient warning pulsed with light, as if it had been waiting 50,000 years to deliver its terrible message. The time of ending had begun. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 3 days of Dr. Vasquez's discovery, every major news network was broadcasting the same shocking headline: "Ancient prophecy names humans as galactic threat." On Zerion Prime, the crystal world of the Zephyrites, the Great Council met in emergency session. The massive chamber rang with discordant harmonies as hundreds of crystal beings debated in their musical language. Where once their voices had created beautiful melodies, now they produced harsh, fearful sounds. Council leader Melodia's voice cut through the noise like a sharp bell. "The evidence cannot be ignored. The predecessor prophecy is clear. Humans are the catalyst that will bring destruction to us all. But they have been our friends," sang a younger council member. "Humans have brought new ideas, new ways of thinking. They have helped us solve problems we couldn't solve alone. And perhaps that is exactly the danger," Melodia replied. "Their ways are not our ways. They think differently, act differently. The prophecy speaks of stubborn hearts. We have all seen how humans refuse to give up, even when logic says they should." Across the chamber, other voices joined the debate. Some called for immediate action to remove humans from galactic space. Others argued for caution, saying they should study the prophecy more carefully before making decisions. But fear was winning the argument. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Strategic Command Center, watching displays that showed the galaxy-wide reaction to the prophecy. Red warning lights blinked across the star map as human colonies and outposts reported problems. "New Horizon Colony is requesting immediate evacuation," reported Lieutenant Torres. "The Altarian government has given all humans 48 hours to leave their territory." Admiral Chen's jaw tightened. "What's the reason?" "They say it's for our own protection. There have been protests, some violence. The local population is demanding that humans be removed." Another officer spoke up. Ma'am, we're getting similar reports from 17 other systems. Trade agreements are being canceled. The Zephyrite Crystal Consortium has frozen all human assets in their banks. Admiral Chen walked to the main display, where Earth hung like a blue jewel in space. Around it, the defense platforms that protected humanity's homeworld seemed suddenly very small against the vastness of the galaxy. 50 years, she said quietly. 50 years we've worked to build these relationships. And now, Admiral, called Captain Rodriguez from the communications station. We're receiving a priority message from Dr. Marcus Webb on Altair Prime. The main screen flickered to life, showing a young man with worried eyes. Behind him, Admiral Chen could see the elegant spires of an Altarian research facility. Admiral Chen, the situation here is deteriorating rapidly, Dr. Webb said. I've been confined to my quarters for my own safety. The Altarians are scared, ma'am. These are the most peaceful people in the galaxy, and they're talking about weapons and defensive measures. What exactly are they saying, Doctor? They're afraid that our presence here will attract whatever destroyed the predecessors. They want us gone, but they're trying to be polite about it. The problem is the younger Altarians aren't being polite. They're demanding action. The transmission was interrupted by the sound of shouting from outside Dr. Webb's window. He looked over his shoulder nervously. Admiral, I need to go. They're saying all humans need to be at the spaceport by tomorrow morning. If we're not... He shook his head. Just send ships, ma'am. Send ships fast. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Far from Earth, on the military world of Drakmor, General Vextar of the Saurian Empire studied the prophecy data with cold, calculating eyes. The reptilian warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights of the war room. The prophecy presents us with an opportunity, he told his assembled officers. If humans are truly the harbinger of galactic destruction, then eliminating them would save everyone. Colonel Sektar, his second-in-command, nodded agreement. Our intelligence reports that human military forces are scattered across the galaxy on diplomatic missions. They are vulnerable. The other species are too soft, General Vextar continued. They speak of protection and careful study, but the prophecy is clear. When humans achieved space travel, they started a countdown to disaster. Every day they remain in space brings us closer to whatever destroyed the predecessors. He turned to the holographic display, showing human positions throughout Saurian space. We will present this as a preventive action to save the galaxy. The humans are few and they are weak compared to our forces. What of the other species? Asked Colonel Sektar. Will they support us? They will thank us afterward, the general replied with certainty. When the threat is eliminated and the galaxy is safe, they will understand that we did what was necessary. Orders went out to Saurian fleets throughout their territory. Under the cover of increased security patrols, warships began moving toward positions where they could intercept human vessels. On the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the galactic news feeds with growing horror. The discovery that should have been the greatest archaeological find in history had become a weapon turned against her own species. We should have studied it more carefully, she told Zixtal as they sat in the station's observation lounge. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see the beautiful blue-green world below, home to the insectoid hive minds. You did nothing wrong, Elena, Zixtal replied, but his musical voice was sad. The truth would have come out eventually. Better that it came from scientists than from politicians or soldiers. But look what's happening, Elena said, gesturing at the news displays. Species that have been friends for decades are turning against each other. The Galactic Council is talking about emergency measures. There are reports of human ships being turned away from ports where they've been welcome for years. Krist's bell-like voice joined the conversation. My people are frightened. The crystal archives contain records of what happened when civilizations fell to the predecessor's fate. Entire world simply empty. No life, no technology, just dead rock floating in space. But the prophecy doesn't say humans will destroy the galaxy, Elena protested. It says they're a catalyst, a trigger for something else. Maybe humans are meant to help, not harm. That is not how the galaxy is reading it, said Jeknor, his mandibles clicking nervously. The hive minds have analyzed every possible interpretation. In 97% of scenarios, humans are seen as the cause of galactic destruction. Elena felt a deep sadness settle over her. So that's it? 50 years of building friendships and alliances, and now we're pariahs? Before anyone could answer, The station's communication system activated. The image of Captain Sarah Martinez, commander of the human escort vessel Prometheus, appeared on the screen. Dr. Vasquez, we need to talk. We've received orders to evacuate all human personnel from the system immediately. Evacuate? Why? The hive mind government has requested that all humans leave their territory within 72 hours. They're being polite about it, but the message is clear. We're not welcome here anymore. Elena looked around at her alien colleagues, seeing the pain in their faces. These beings had become her friends over years of working together. They had shared discoveries, celebrated successes, and supported each other through failures. I'm sorry, Zixtal said quietly. This is not what any of us wanted. I know, Elena replied. But fear makes people do things they never thought they would do. As the team began the sad process of packing up their research, Elena couldn't help but think about the prophecy. Somewhere in its ancient words was a truth they hadn't discovered yet. The predecessors had been the most advanced civilization in galactic history. They wouldn't have left a warning without also leaving hope. But hope was in short supply as human ships began the long journey home, carrying refugees from a galaxy that had suddenly turned against them. The prophecy had spoken of fire burning between the stars. As Elena watched the first evacuation ships launch from nearby systems, she wondered if that fire had already begun to spread. The first sign came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at the galaxy's edge. Technician Yara Okafor was finishing her night shift when the long-range sensors began picking up strange readings from beyond the galactic rim. That can't be right, she muttered, checking the instruments twice. The energy signatures were massive, but they came from empty space between galaxies where nothing should exist. She called her supervisor, Commander Park. Sir, you need to see this. The sensors are detecting something huge moving in the void. Commander Park arrived within minutes, his face grim as he studied the readings. How big are we talking? The computer estimates the largest signatures are the size of small moons, sir. But that's impossible. There's nothing out there but empty space. As they watched, more signals appeared on the sensors. Dozens of massive objects were moving through the void between galaxies, heading directly toward their galaxy's outer edge. Get me a direct line to Earth Command, Commander Park ordered. Priority 1. But before the transmission could be sent, something happened that changed everything. The agricultural world of New Ceres, home to 3 million colonists, simply vanished. The first indication was when the regular check-in from New Ceres failed to arrive. The planet sent automated status reports every 6 hours, and the system had never failed in 20 years of operation. Admiral Chen was in her office when the emergency alert came through. Lieutenant Torres burst in without knocking, his face pale with shock. Admiral, we've lost contact with New Ceres. The entire system is dark. Equipment failure? She asked, though something in Torres's expression told her it was worse. No, ma'am. We sent a probe to investigate. The planet. It's gone. Admiral Chen felt the blood drain from her face. Gone? What do you mean, gone? I mean there's empty space where New Ceres used to be. No debris, no energy signatures, nothing. Just a perfectly spherical void where a planet and its orbital stations were yesterday. Within hours, similar reports began arriving from across the galaxy's outer rim. The mining world of Kepler 88b disappeared during the middle of its day cycle. The research station at Wolf 359 vanished along with its staff of 200 scientists from 12 different species. Each disappearance was the same. One moment the world existed. The next there was only empty space. On Kethmaran, Dr. Elena Vasquez and her team had remained behind when the evacuation orders came. They were too close to a breakthrough in translating the predecessor data to leave now. As reports of the disappearances reached them, Elena realized with growing horror that they might be looking at the answer. The deeper vaults, she told Zixtal as they worked frantically to access more of the crystal data cores. There must be more information about what the predecessors were really afraid of. They had discovered additional storage chambers beneath the main vault, filled with more advanced technology than anything in the upper levels. The crystals here hummed with dangerous energy, and the symbols carved into the walls seemed to move when viewed directly. Here, called Christ from across the chamber. This core contains astronomical data. Star charts showing... Oh no. Elena rushed to see what Christ had found. The crystal was projecting a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, but it showed 2 different time periods. In the first image, the galaxy was full of life and light. In the second, vast sections were simply dark. The timing matches the disappearances of worlds on the rim, Christ reported. But according to this data, the predecessors called it the Great Harvesting. Jeknor's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed information from another data core. The entities responsible are called devourers in the predecessor language. They exist partially outside normal space and time. Outside normal space? Elena asked. What does that mean? Zixtal's musical voice was filled with dread as he translated another section. They exist in higher dimensions. From their perspective, our three-dimensional space is like a flat surface they can reach into. They can phase in and out of our reality at will. Elena felt sick as the picture became clear. And the prophecy about humans? Not a warning about humans being destroyers, Zixtal said quietly. A countdown. The predecessors calculated that when a species with humanity's specific traits achieved space travel, it meant the galaxy had reached sufficient development for the devourers to return. Ripeness, whispered Chris. The galaxy needed to ripen like fruit before harvest. Another data core activated, showing Elena the truth that made her legs weak. The predecessors hadn't vanished 50,000 years ago. They had been consumed, harvested like grain by beings that treated entire galaxies as food sources. The devourers move between galaxies, Jeknor reported. They consume the life force and technological development of entire civilizations, then move on to the next galaxy when nothing remains. Elena stared at the data in horror. How many galaxies have they destroyed? According to these records, hundreds. Possibly thousands. They've been doing this for millions of years. But then Zixtal made a discovery that gave Elena the first spark of hope she had felt in days. Wait, he said, his voice excited. There's more to the prophecy. A section we couldn't translate before because the symbols were too damaged. Elena hurried to his side as he worked with the restored data. The new symbols were complex, layered with multiple meanings that required careful interpretation. The young race with red blood and stubborn hearts, he read slowly, will be the flame that burns between stars, not to destroy but to illuminate the darkness and show others the way forward. Stubborn hearts, Elena repeated. What does that mean exactly? Christ's bell-like voice rang with understanding. Humans never give up. Every species in the galaxy knows this about you. When logic says surrender, when defeat seems certain, humans keep fighting. The predecessors were brilliant, Jeknor added, but they were also logical. When they calculated that the devourers could not be defeated, they accepted their fate and tried to preserve warning for future civilizations. Elena felt pieces clicking together in her mind, but humans wouldn't accept that. We'd keep fighting even against impossible odds. Exactly, Zixtal said. The prophecy isn't about humans causing destruction. It's about humans being the catalyst for resistance. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the research ship in orbit. Captain Martinez's voice was tense with fear. Dr. Vasquez, we're detecting massive energy signatures approaching the system. Something big is coming through hyperspace, and it's not showing up on any known ship signatures. Elena looked at her alien colleagues, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. Send everything we've discovered to Earth Command and the Galactic Council. All of it. What about us? Asked Captain Martinez. Elena studied the data cores around them, still pulsing with information they hadn't fully decoded. We stay. There's more here, something the predecessors left behind. Maybe instructions, maybe weapons. If the Devourers are coming, we need every advantage we can find. As she spoke, the first Devourer ship phased into normal space at the edge of the system. It was like nothing in any database, a structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. Looking at it directly caused physical pain, as if the human mind wasn't designed to comprehend its geometry. But Elena didn't look away. She stared at the impossible ship and felt something burning in her chest. Not fear, but defiance. The same stubborn refusal to surrender that had driven humans to the stars despite every obstacle. The Devourers had destroyed hundreds of galaxies, consumed countless civilizations more advanced than humanity. But they had never faced a species that simply refused to accept defeat. The fire between the stars had been lit, and for the first time in 50,000 years, the Devourers were about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. Elena smiled grimly as she turned back to the data cores. They had work to do. The first Devourer attack fleet reached the Altarian home system, just as the Galactic Council was meeting an emergency session. High Counselor Zenara had been in the middle of a speech about managing the human crisis when the reports began flooding in. The orbital defense platforms, "They're gone," reported the communications officer, her musical voice cracking with disbelief. No explosion, no debris. They just stopped existing. Through the council chamber's vast windows, they could see the impossible shapes of Devourer ships hanging in space above their beautiful world. The vessels hurt to look at directly. Their geometry twisted in ways that made no sense to minds evolved in three-dimensional space. "Conventional weapons have no effect," came another report. "Energy beams pass right through them. Missile strikes phase through their hulls as if they weren't there." High Counselor Zenara stood frozen, watching his civilization's greatest achievements being erased from existence. The Altarians were philosophers and artists, beings who had spent centuries perfecting the harmony between technology and nature. They had no experience with warfare on this scale. "Contact the human fleet," he said quietly. Tell them we need their help." Admiral Sarah Chen received the transmission aboard her flagship Indomitable, currently racing toward the galactic core with the combined human fleet. The message from Altair Prime was barely coherent, filled with harmonics of fear and desperation. "Admiral," reported Captain Rodriguez from the tactical station, "we're getting similar calls from 17 different systems. The Devourers are hitting worlds across the outer rim simultaneously." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display, watching red zones spread across the galaxy like an infection. Each red marker represented a world under attack or already consumed. The pattern was clear. The Devourers were working their way inward toward the galactic core, where the highest concentration of advanced civilizations lived. "How long until they reach Earth?" she asked. "At their current rate of advance, 36 hours, ma'am." Admiral Chen closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her daughter back on Earth, probably getting ready for school and completely unaware that alien monsters were consuming their way across the galaxy. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships maximum acceleration to Altair Prime. We're going to make our stand there." "Ma'am," said Rodriguez hesitantly, "our weapons won't be any more effective than theirs. We don't have anything that can hurt beings from higher dimensions." "Maybe," Admiral Chen replied, "but we have something they don't." "What's that, ma'am?" "We're too stupid to know when we're beaten." While the human fleet raced toward the first battle, Dr. Elena Vasquez made a breakthrough in the deepest vaults of Catamaran. Hidden beneath layers of protective barriers, she found a chamber the predecessors had sealed with their most advanced technology. "The energy readings are off the charts," reported Chris as they worked to open the final vault. "Whatever they hid in here, they really didn't want it found." The chamber door finally dissolved, revealing a room that defied physics. The walls curved in impossible directions, and the air itself seemed to sparkle with dimensional energy. At the center stood a device that looked like a cross between a weapon and a scientific instrument. "It's a dimensional anchor," Zixtel said, reading the symbols carved around the device. "The predecessors were working on a way to force the Devourers to exist fully in our dimensional space." Elena approached the device carefully. "If we can trap them in 3 dimensions, our weapons might actually work." "But look at these warnings," Jeknor said, pointing to symbols that glowed red with danger. "The device requires enormous amounts of energy. Using it would probably destroy whatever planet it's activated on." Elena studied the warnings, then looked at her alien friends. "There's something else. This isn't just a weapon. It's a template, a blueprint. If we can understand how it works, we could build more," Christ finished. "Smaller versions that don't require planet-killing amounts of energy." As they worked to download the device's specifications, Elena received an urgent transmission from Admiral Chen. The human fleet had reached Altair Prime and engaged the Devourer forces, with devastating results. "We can't touch them," Admiral Chen reported, her voice tight with frustration. "They phase in and out of normal space at will. We've lost 12 ships and haven't scratched them." "Admiral, we've found something," Elena said quickly. "A way to anchor the Devourers in normal space. But we need time to modify our weapons. Time is something we don't have. They're tearing through our formations like we're not even here." Elena looked at the dimensional anchor, then at the data they'd extracted from the predecessor files. An idea began forming, desperate and dangerous. Admiral, what if I told you that your nuclear weapons might work if we modify them correctly? Nuclear weapons? Against beings from higher dimensions? Not against them directly. Against the fabric of space-time itself. If we detonate modified nuclear devices at specific dimensional frequencies, we might be able to create tiers in reality that force the devourers into our dimensional space. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. How do we modify nuclear weapons to affect dimensional barriers? We need exotic matter as a catalyst, and we need to precisely calculate the dimensional frequencies. It's going to be dangerous as hell. More dangerous than letting them consume the galaxy. Elena smiled grimly. Good point. Transmitting the technical specifications now. What followed was the most frantic 24 hours in human history. Scientists and engineers across the human fleet worked around the clock to modify their nuclear arsenal, according to Elena's specifications. The other galactic species contributed what they could. Zephyrite harmonic resonators to fine-tune dimensional frequencies, Altarian quantum computers to calculate targeting solutions, and Saurian industrial equipment to manufacture the exotic matter required. General Vextar, who had been planning to attack human ships just days before, now found himself working alongside human engineers to save his own people. Your species is insane, he told Admiral Chan as they watched human technicians work with radioactive exotic matter that could kill them if mishandled. Any rational species would have evacuated to the far rim and hoped the devourers would be satisfied with the core worlds. Maybe, Admiral Chen replied, but rational doesn't always mean right. The first test of the modified weapons came when a devourer ship attacked the human research station at Wolf 359. Captain James Martinez, commanding the destroyer Defiant, fired a single modified torpedo at the impossible vessel. The explosion tore a hole in space itself. Reality rippled like water, and for a brief moment the devourer ship was pulled fully into normal three-dimensional space. In that instant it was vulnerable. The Defiant's conventional weapons opened fire, and for the first time in the war, a devourer ship took damage. Pieces of its hull broke away, revealing an interior that pulsed with organic light. It worked, Captain Martinez reported. The dimensional anchor pulled them into normal space. They can be hurt, but the victory came at a cost. The dimensional tear created by the modified torpedo began expanding uncontrollably, threatening to tear the entire system apart. It took 3 Zephyrite harmonic dampening fields working together to close the rift. The weapons work, Admiral Chen told the assembled fleet commanders, but they're dangerous as hell. Every shot risks tearing holes in reality itself. General Vextar studied the tactical reports with professional interest. A weapon that might destroy the wielder as easily as the target. Only humans would consider this an acceptable trade-off. Do we have any choice? Asked High Counselor Zenara. Admiral Chen looked at the status display showing devourer forces advancing toward the galactic core. Hundreds of worlds had already fallen. Billions of lives consumed by beings that existed beyond normal space and time. No, she said finally. We don't have a choice. We either fight with weapons that might kill us, or we definitely die when they harvest our worlds. The word went out across the galaxy. Any ship capable of mounting the modified weapons should converge on the galactic core. The final battle would be fought there, where the gravitational forces of the central black hole created natural dimensional instabilities that might give them an advantage. As the combined fleet prepared for the last stand, Elena made one final discovery in the predecessor vaults. Hidden in the deepest files was a message clearly intended for whoever found the dimensional anchor. To those who come after, the message read, "Know that we failed not from lack of courage, but from lack of hope. We calculated the odds and found them impossible. Perhaps that is why we could not succeed. Perhaps victory requires the inability to accept defeat." Elena smiled as she read the final line. "We have given you the tools. Now show us what impossible looks like." The devourers were coming to the galactic core, expecting to find the same resigned acceptance they had encountered in hundreds of other galaxies. Instead, they were about to meet a species that had never learned the meaning of the word surrender. The fire between the stars was about to become an inferno. The final battle began at the edge of the galactic core, where space itself was twisted by the massive gravitational forces of the central black hole. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared to face an enemy that had consumed countless civilizations. Fleet status report, she ordered. Captain Rodriguez checked his displays. 2,000 ships from 37 different species, all armed with dimensional anchor weapons. The Zephyrite harmonic ships are in position to stabilize reality tears. Altarian quantum computers are calculating targeting solutions in real time. Through the bridge windows, Admiral Chen could see the impossible sight of former enemies working together. Saurian warships flew alongside human destroyers. Delicate Altarian research vessels carried modified weapons that could tear holes in spacetime. Even the peaceful Zephyrite had weaponized their harmonic technology. "Admiral," called the sensor operator. "Massive dimensional distortions detected at the edge of the system." "They're coming." The first Devourer ships phased into normal space like nightmares made real. Each vessel was the size of a city, but their geometry hurt to perceive directly. They existed in more dimensions than the mind could process, appearing as twisted shadows of themselves that shifted and changed when viewed. Behind them came something that made even these horrors seem small. The mothership was a structure so vast it defied comprehension, a construction that seemed to exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was less a ship than a living city, pulsing with organic light and extending impossible geometries into spaces that shouldn't exist. "My God," whispered Captain Rodriguez. "How do we fight something like that?" "The same way we fight everything else," Admiral Chen replied. "One shot at a time." The battle began with the outer defensive line engaging the smaller Devourer ships. Human destroyers fired their modified nuclear torpedoes, tearing holes in reality that forced the alien vessels into normal space. In those brief moments of vulnerability, conventional weapons could damage them. But for every Devourer ship that was hurt, 2 more phased into existence. The enemy seemed endless, pouring through dimensional barriers like water through a broken dam. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported damage control aboard the Indomitable, as a Devourer energy beam partially phased through their shields. The beam exists in 4 dimensions. Our armor can't stop something that attacks from directions we can't see. Admiral Chen watched as ship after ship fell to weapons that ignored conventional defenses. The Altarian flagship Harmony dissolved as a Devourer ship simply phased through it, consuming the life force of everyone aboard. The massive Saurian dreadnought Iron Fang was cut in half by an energy beam that existed partially outside normal space. "We're losing," Captain Rodriguez said grimly. "For every ship we damage, they destroy 5 of ours." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display, watching the red markers that represented fallen ships multiply across the battlefield. The mathematics were brutal. At this rate, the entire fleet would be destroyed within hours. But then she noticed something. The dimensional tiers from our weapons. They're not closing as quickly near the black hole. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice came through the comm system from the research ship Newton. "Admiral, the gravitational distortions from the black hole are affecting local spacetime. The dimensional barriers are weaker here." "What does that mean for our weapons?" "It means we can create bigger tiers in reality with less energy. And those tiers will last longer before spacetime heals itself." Admiral Chen felt a dangerous idea forming. "How much bigger?" "Theoretically, if we concentrated all our modified weapons on a single point near the black hole's event horizon, we could create a dimensional rift large enough to trap the entire mothership in normal space." Captain Rodriguez understood immediately. But the energy release would be enormous. Any ship close enough to target the exact spot would be destroyed in the explosion. "Not just destroyed," Elena corrected. "Erased from spacetime itself. There wouldn't even be debris left." Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display, watching more ships fall to the Devourer assault. The outer defensive lines were collapsing, and the enemy was advancing toward the core worlds where billions of civilians waited helplessly. "All ships. This is Admiral Chen. We're going to try something insane." She outlined the plan. A concentrated strike using every dimensional anchor weapon in the fleet, targeted at a specific point near the black hole where spacetime was already unstable. The resulting explosion would create a massive reality tear that could trap the mothership in normal 3-dimensional space. "The problem is targeting," she explained. "Someone needs to get close enough to the mothership to paint the exact spot with targeting lasers. Close enough that they won't survive the explosion." The comm channel fell silent for a moment. Then General Vextar's voice came through, filled with grim determination. My ship will provide targeting. The Iron Fang is already damaged. We won't survive much longer anyway. General, you don't have to. Admiral, my people called humans destroyers. We were wrong. You are builders. You build hope where none should exist. Let us help you build a victory. Before Admiral Chen could respond, other voices joined the channel. Captain Martinez from the Defiant volunteered to provide backup targeting. Commander Singh from the research vessel Discovery offered to calculate the precise dimensional frequencies needed. One by one, dozens of ships volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. No, Admiral Chen said firmly. The Indomitable will provide primary targeting. This is my plan, my responsibility. With respect, Admiral, Captain Rodriguez said quietly. You're needed to coordinate the fleet. Let us do this. Admiral Chen looked around the bridge at her crew. These people had followed her across the galaxy, trusted her decisions even when they seemed impossible. Now they were asking her to let them die. Belay that order, Captain. The Indomitable leads from the front. The final assault began with Admiral Chen's ship racing directly toward the mothership, followed by a dozen volunteer vessels. The massive Devourer construct seemed to notice their approach, turning weapons on them that existed in dimensions beyond human perception. The cruiser Melbourne simply ceased to exist as a four-dimensional energy beam erased it from spacetime. The destroyer Yorktown lost half its mass to a weapon that removed matter from reality itself. But the survivors pressed on, pushing deeper into the impossible geometry of the mothership's defenses. Targeting solution acquired, reported the tactical officer, as the Indomitable shook under multi-dimensional weapons fire, painting the target now. Throughout the fleet, every ship with dimensional anchor weapons locked onto the targeting beam. The modified nuclear arsenals of a dozen species prepared to fire simultaneously at a single point in space-time. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. It's been an honor serving with you. Fire on my mark. The mothership seemed to realize what was happening. Devourer ships began converging on the Indomitable, trying to stop the targeting beam. Energy weapons that existed in 5 dimensions tore through the ship's hull, but the targeting lasers held steady. 3, 2, 1, mark. 2,000 modified nuclear weapons fired at once, their dimensional anchor fields converging on the exact spot near the black hole's event horizon. The explosion that followed was beyond description. Reality itself screamed as spacetime tore open like fabric, creating a wound in the universe that exposed the raw chaos of higher dimensions. The mothership, caught in the expanding tear, was pulled inexorably into normal 3-dimensional space. For the first time in its existence, the massive construct was fully vulnerable to conventional weapons. The surviving ships of the Galactic Fleet opened fire with everything they had. Fusion beams, antimatter torpedoes, and plasma cannons hammered the mothership's hull as it struggled to phase back into higher dimensions. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the dying Indomitable as the impossible structure began to break apart. Sections of the mothership exploded in brilliant flashes, and for a moment she thought they had won. Then she realized the dimensional tear was still expanding. Elena, she called over the comm. The rift isn't closing. It's getting bigger. Dr. Vasquez's voice was tight with fear. The black hole's gravity is pulling the tear open. If it continues expanding, it could tear apart local spacetime completely. Admiral Chen understood. They had wounded the mothership, but the cure might be worse than the disease. The expanding dimensional rift threatened to destroy the entire galactic core. All ships with harmonic dampening fields converge on the rift. We need to close it before. The mothership's final act was one of pure spite. As its hull cracked open like an egg, it released something that had been contained in its core. A pulse of energy that existed in dimensions beyond counting reached out toward the dimensional rift, trying to tear it open even further. But the pulse met unexpected resistance. Human ships, many of them heavily damaged, threw themselves into its path. They couldn't stop the energy directly, but they could absorb some of it, weakening it enough for the Zephyrite harmonic fields to counteract the rest. The destroyer Defiant was the last ship to intercede, piloted by Captain Martinez alone after his crew had been evacuated.